Would the senator from Kentucky yield for a question without losing his right to the floor?
Yes.
I thank my colleague, and it is good to be back on the floor with him once again on this topic. And as we have indicated, this will not be the last time that we are back on the floor. And my colleague has made a number of very important points already. I was especially pleased my colleague brought to light something that is little known, that the Attorney General of the United States is interested in, the FBI Director is interested in requiring companies to build weaknesses into their products. In other words, we have had companies interested in encryption, as my colleague has mentioned, and what's happened as a result of that encryption, they had a chance to start getting the confidence of consumers, both in the United States and worldwide, back. And then the FBI director has been interested in effect, requiring companies to build a back door into their systems. And this, once again, kind of defies common sense, because the keys won't just be out there for the good guys. They will also be available to the bad guys. And I'm very pleased that my colleague from Kentucky highlighted one particular new development in this debate. And I have sought, as a member of the Intelligence Committee for some time, to come up with an approach that once again demonstrates that security and liberty are not mutually exclusive. We can have both, but we're certainly not going to have both, as my colleague touched on in his statement, if the policy of the FBI director is to require companies to build a back door into their products, build weaknesses into their products. Now, the senator from Kentucky is very much aware that my staff and a number of senators are currently working through a number of issues and amendments related to the question of how we can pass trade legislation and get more family wage jobs for our people through exports. And a number of us, myself specifically, have been concerned that the majority leader and other supporters of business as usual on bulk collection of all of these phone records would somehow try to take advantage of our current discussions and try to, in effect, sneak through a motion to extend Section 215 of the USA Patriot Act. As long as the senator from Kentucky has the floor, that cannot happen. And my hope is, once our colleagues have agreed on a path to go forward with job-creating, export-oriented trade legislation, it will be possible to resume our work on that very important bill. In the meantime, my question for my colleague pertains to an issue that he noted I have been at for some time. As my colleague knows, I have been trying to end the bulk phone record collection program since 2006. And the reason I have is that what this bulk phone record collection program is a federal human relations database. When the federal government knows who you've called, when you've called, and often where you have called from, which is the case certainly if somebody calls from a landline and someone has a phone book, the government's got a lot of private and intimate information about you. If the government knows that you called a psychiatrist 3 times, for example, in 36 hours, twice after midnight, the government doesn't have to be listening to that call. The government knows a whole lot about what most Americans would consider to be very private. So this has been an important issue. My colleague from Kentucky has been an invaluable ally on this particular cause since he arrived in the Senate. And I just want to give a little bit more background and then get my colleague's reaction to this question. I've seen several of my colleagues come to the floor of the Senate talking about why we ought to keep bulk phone record collection. And the statement has somehow been that this is absolutely key for strong counterterror. That is a baffling assertion, I would say to my colleague from Kentucky, because even the Director of National Intelligence and the Attorney General are saying that it isn't. So what we have is members of the Senate saying that bulk collection, some of them, ought to be preserved in order to fight terror, and the Director of National Intelligence and the Attorney General, two individuals who are not exactly soft on terror, saying that it's not. Now, if senators and those who might be following this debate are seeking a more detailed analysis, I hope that they'll check out the very lengthy report on surveillance that was issued by the President's Review Group. This group's members have some very impressive national security credentials. I mean, these are not people who are soft on fighting, terror. One of them was the senior counterterror advisor to both President Clinton and President Bush. Another served as acting director of the CIA. And this review group, a review group led by individuals with pristine anti-terror credentials, said on page 104 of their report, staff sometimes kids me, I'm sure this is the case for the senator from Kentucky because I always say page 104. I'll quote here, "The information contributed to terrorist investigations by the use of Section 215, bulk telephony metadata, was not essential to preventing attacks and could readily have been obtained in a timely manner using individual Section 215 orders." So what this distinguished group of experts said supports what the senator from Kentucky is saying, what I and others have been saying for some time. So the senator from Kentucky, pointed out my service on the Intelligence Committee. I think Senator Feinstein and I are two of the 5 longest-serving members in the committee's history. We didn't find out about bulk collection until it had been underway for quite some time because it was concealed from most members of the Intelligence Committee for several years. But given the fact that we began to see in 2006 and early 2007 what's at stake, this has been a fight that has been going on for 8 years. And one of the reasons, an additional reason, that I appreciate the senator from Kentucky being here now is that for these 8 years and multiple reauthorizations, it's always been the same pattern. It was almost like the night follows the day. Those who are in favor of Dragnet surveillance and those who are in favor of the bulk collection program, in effect, wait until the very last minute. They wait until the last minute, and then they say, oh my goodness, it is a dangerous world. We've got to continue this program just the way it is. Well, I tell my colleague from Kentucky, and I know he shares my view on this, there is no question that it is a very dangerous world. Anybody who served on the Intelligence Committee, as I have for more than 14 years, and goes in to those classified meetings, weekly, does not walk out of there with without the judgment that it is a very dangerous, world. But what doesn't make sense is to be pursuing approaches that don't make us safer and compromise our liberties. That's what doesn't make sense. And so last year, along with my colleagues, Senator Heinrich and Senator Mark Udall, I filed a brief in a case that was before the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. It's an important court, one of the highest in our country. In the brief, we said, and I quote, "We have reviewed this surveillance extensively and have seen no evidence that the bulk collection of Americans' phone records has provided any intelligence of value that could not have been gathered through means that caused far less harm to the privacy interests of millions of Americans." And I'd say to my colleague, what we are talking about are, in effect, conventional approaches with respect to court orders, and then there are emergency circumstances. Emergency circumstances, so when the government believes it has got to act to protect the American people, it can move quickly and then, in effect, come back and settle up later. But the conclusion that we reached after reviewing bulk collection very carefully was based on 8 years' worth of work. And, of course, we've recently had this court declare bulk collection to be illegal. So my first question is, does the senator from Kentucky agree that there is no evidence that Dragnet surveillance now makes America any safer?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I think it's also very difficult to prove these things one way or another sometimes, and we're at a great disadvantage because a lot of times they hold all of the information. So I think it was nothing short of miraculous that you and others were able to investigate this and show that in reality, all of these folks that they allege could have been caught, would have been caught through traditional surveillance, through traditional warrants. And I think this is a pretty important point because they want us to live in fear and give up the Fourth Amendment, but it turns out even the practical argument isn't an accurate one, because it turns out that almost always, if not always, the terrorists seem to be caught through sort of the normal channels of human intelligence, suspicion, finding something out about them that causes us to investigate them. And I, like the senator from Oregon, do want to catch terrorists, and I also want to keep our freedom at the same time. And I think it was a pretty important conclusion, not only by the review board, but also by the the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board as well, the review panel, two groups of folks from the administration. And one question that I would be interested in also from the senator from Oregon is, in an op-ed in December, Senator Wyden wrote in the LA Times that building a backdoor into every cell phone, tablet, or laptop means deliberately creating weaknesses that hackers and foreign governments can exploit. But I would be interested in entertaining a question concerning that.
I apologize to my colleague. Could my colleague just restate that briefly?
This was in an op-ed that was written by the senator from Oregon in LA Times in December, and I'm quoting from the op-ed. It says, building a backdoor into every cell phone, tablet, or laptop means deliberately creating weaknesses that hackers and foreign governments can exploit. And I think expanding upon that in the form of a question, I think would help us to understand exactly what you mean by that.
What the senator is asking about is a statement made by the FBI director